I'm Mary Wright. I'm with the City of Phoenix. I work in the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation. Um, I'm one of the steering committee members for this group. Currently subbing in for Anne Richmond, who usually is our fearless leader. Um, she should be back here in a little bit, but in the meantime, I'm jumping in, and we have today a speaker. I'm very pleased to introduce Bill Updike with the Smart Surfaces Coalition. Um, with the city, we've had the great pleasure of working with Smart Surfaces Coalition, or SSC. Um, they've We've been sort of thought partners and project partners on a number of different initiatives. It's been a great opportunity for us, and they also have some amazing resources that we thought this group might appreciate and get something out of, especially around tools and yeah, the tools and other sort of assistance, technical assistance, and these sorts of things that are really meant for all of us as a community, not just the city of Phoenix. So hopefully this is helpful for folks. And with that, I will let Bill take it away. Thank you, Bill.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. And thanks to you all for taking the time to listen a little bit about the program we've been working on with City of Phoenix, as well as other folks, other cities around the country. So I've got some slides that I'm going to bring up just to give you a kind of landscape of our work and give you some context. And then I'm going to jump into showing you some of the data tools that we've developed for the project. Um, Mary, are you seeing the slide here? Great. Yeah, so Smart Service Coalition is an organization, nonprofit organization made up of more than 40 groups. Think of organizations like American Public Health Association, National League of Cities, World Resources Institute, that are really focused around transforming urban infrastructure to mitigate things like urban heat islands, stormwater flooding, and really deliver resilient and healthy communities for urban areas. Um, the term smart surfaces may sound a little bit wonky. What we're not talking about the kind of Internet of Things, the smart cities world where we're talking about tons of sensors and all the sort of data point pieces, although those things are also relevant to our work. Really talking about proven infrastructure strategies that mitigate climate change, urban heat and stormwater flooding. So we're talking about cool surfaces, cool walls, cool roofs, cool pavements. We're talking about green infrastructure and trees, green stormwater infrastructure and trees. We're talking about permeable surfaces like permeable paving, and then energy generating surfaces as well. And with a particular interest in the combination and comprehensive approach to surface infrastructure in cities in order to, mitigate the things that I was talking about before. There wasn't really a term before that kind of collected all of those interventions under one rubric. And so that's why we coined this term, smart surfaces. Um, some of the initial work we did was really focused just around the benefit cost analysis side of our effort. We did modeling for 4 cities in the first phase of our work, where we just focused on the benefit cost analysis piece, including the city of Baltimore. And when we modeled Baltimore, we saw, upwards of potential of 5+ degrees Fahrenheit peak summer temperature reduction citywide and higher in some neighborhoods, millions of tons of CO2e potential reductions and billions in net financial benefits. And in the city of Baltimore, it was convincing enough to leadership there that now the city council has passed, just since in the last 2 years, really, a series of 5 pieces of legislation connected to smart surfaces. It started with a cool roof ordinance in the summer of 2023, and then a bill to look into the creation of a climate resilience authority, kind of a green bank for climate resilience, if you can think of it that way. a couple of pieces of bills on public trees and private trees, and then most recently a bill looking into the creation of 100 acres of urban meadows. And so that success with, the impact that that kind of analysis, benefit cost analysis, data driven policy making was showing led to an expansion of our program into the cities that are in green and the surrounding metro areas as well. And so we've modeled and built tools for these 10 metro areas that are in green here in the program we call Cities for Smart Surfaces. All of this work is the foundation of all this work is, high resolution, high quality micrometeorological modeling for all of the cities and metro areas. That forms the foundation of our analysis and also our benefit cost analysis. And out of this data, and I'm going to show you these tools, we have built a suite of three policy and planning tools that can, really focused around this idea of moving towards like true data-driven policy program and project development. The first is a geospatial tool we call the decision support tool. It's developed in conjunction with our project partners, Trust for Public Land and World Resources Institute, and incorporates that meteorological modeling data from our partner Alto Stratus. So I will show you all these tools. So I'm not going to go into a long description now, but the second tool is what I mentioned before for Baltimore, this web-based benefit cost analysis tool. Instead of, sharing this massive economic spreadsheet model that we have behind the tool, which, the cities would feel overwhelmed by and just would be too much and folks probably wouldn't use it. We built a very user-friendly BCA tool that you can run inside of 5 minutes and get some really high quality, high resolution data out of for decision making. And then the third major policy tool is our Smart Services Policy Tracker tool, again, web-based. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then finally, what we're trying to do is build essentially the first fully comprehensive platform for resilient infrastructure decision making in the country. So we now have added a project implementation platform, which includes these 5 pieces. So we have a spec sheet for smart surface interventions that includes cost and benefit data and includes suggested, performance thresholds based on our research. There's a longer slide deck that elaborates on that spec sheet, but then also adds case studies with cost data from real projects in cities around the country. We have a project checklist that has different smart surface interventions as well as the recommended thresholds that also are tied to certification platforms like LEED, like Envision, like Sites, so that you could easily translate, if you're either required legislatively or your city project is by choice, going for LEED certification. It's sort of a checklist, both to guide decision making around what projects, cities might think about, but also how they fit into those certification platforms. And then we have a project level calculator tool. So this is the project level companion to our benefit cost analysis tool. So let's say you want to do a Green Street project in your city. You're going to do 100,000 square feet of cool pavement. You're going to plant 100 trees. You're going to do 10,000 square feet of rain gardens. You can enter all that data into the project level calculator tool, and it will spit out the benefits both from the economic perspective, from the stormwater mitigation perspective, and from a CO2 and CO2 equivalent perspective. And then the data that is calculated in that tool then is auto-populated, going to be auto-populated into a one-pager, which will have some design around it that project teams could use to communicate the benefits to, uh, you know, city residents or city council members or, other policymakers, and to automate all of that so that it's super fast, and easy to use because I used to work for the city government in Washington, D.C. years ago and know that time is the biggest challenge. Time and inertia are the two biggest challenges we face to drive towards resilient infrastructure. And so everything we're building is around this idea of making these tools very user friendly and very quick to use so we can get past both those time and inertia challenges. Um, so that's kind of a big overview. Any questions about the overall program before I start to show you some of the tools that we've developed? All right. Not seeing anything. Or maybe you could monitor the chat if you see. Oh, I see one from Cleo's
Yeah.
got her hand up.
Hi. Really interested in, seeing examples of this, but just curious if any of the factors you take into account with this sort of like holistic resiliency modeling takes into account like experiences of people who are on the street a lot, like living outside. I know once people from ASU probably know this like way better than I do. I saw some sort of study, I think that ASU did on the impacts of cool pavement for like surface temperature for people who are outside on the cooler pavement. Something about like the reflective either light or heat or something from it. Someone please help me out if you recall seeing that or were part of that study. And that's always so since I saw something like that, it's something I've been interested in is how these, you know, greenhouse gas sustainable infrastructure changes affect the experiences of people who are like on that pavement. Um, Wondering if that is anything that factors into your work or something that has come up in your research around these topics. I know that wasn't a super concise question. Sorry.
No, no, I gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we do too is we manage two peer learning networks. One is called the Smart Services Peer Learning Network, and the other is called the Cool Roadways Partnership. And the Cool Roadways Partnership has about 60 cities that are exploring the implementation of cool pavement technologies. And that topic specifically around the human experience and interaction with cool pavement technologies is a very strong focus of that group. Um, the research is interesting to look at. It's sort of a complicated subject that uh, multiple sort of studies have shown. Studies show that there's an impact on mean radiant temperature. Some show that it's actually worse. Some show that it's better. And so it's a bit of a complicated subject that probably would take longer to talk about than we have on this time, but would love to follow up with you in the future about it. Um, Also point you to probably the more recent study that ASU did about the Cool Pavement program in Phoenix. Dave Saylor's work and others there, which kind of cover some of the complexities of that analysis. Um, the short answer is, there it's still, I mean, maybe there isn't a short answer. It's a complicated question, but the short answer is, if folks are just moving across a space, say on a crosswalk on a road, they're not in that space long enough to have that be a concern. And there's not a concern sort of on the sidewalks. And so the concern is if somebody is just spending time on a road that has a cool pavement coating, and spending a long amount of time on that road for whatever reason, that's where I think the question sort of comes up and is more interesting. But it is a complicated one, and yeah, probably would merit might consider joining the Cool Roadways Partnership and talking to some of those folks about it because it's definitely a big focus of that group.
Got
I
it.
don't know if
Thank
that was
you.
helpful or not, Cleo.
Yes,
You get the
no.
idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to jump over to some of these, show you some of these tools that we've developed. Um, I will start with the geospatial tool. Um, Mary, we're seeing that now?
Looks good.
Excellent. Okay. So this is a geospatial tool we built for the 10 metro areas. I'm going to select Phoenix here. Um, it has typical things that a normal geospatial tool would have in terms of areas, geographies, census tracts, etc. Um, it has overlay data. Also, there are a lot of typical things in here, but there's also some added interesting things like a 10-minute walk to schools and 10-minute walk to parks. There's mapping for historic redlining in here. There is data from the historically disadvantaged communities. We pulled this off of the CGEST website before the new administration took it down. So that's in there. And there's tree equity score data from our colleagues at American Forest. Um, so there's some interesting overlay data in here, but then we get into the kind of meat of the differences of what we have. So there's tree canopy. There's a tree canopy satellite driven mapping. There's fraction of surface covered by vegetation. There's this piece which is the kind of core of a lot of our analysis. It's a very high resolution, high accuracy land use, land cover data set that was developed by the World Resources Institute, upwards of like 94% accurate for these different land surface types. For us in particular, it's important because it has a sophistication of determining low and steep slope buildings, which is really relevant from a cool roof perspective and important for us. And so this data layer is in here as well, and it's foundational for our analysis. And then there's also albedo or reflectivity satellite-driven mapping in here. So that's some of the surface mapping that's in here. And then we have our meteorological modeling data in here, both at the city scale and the metro area scale. So this is our analysis of the cooling potential from smart surfaces. I've just selected just the city itself here. You can click on either census tract or for the whole city, and it brings up some really interesting data points. In this case, I just picked the whole city here. It has data around like the reflectivity of different roof types and the reflectivity of parking and roads in the city. On average, it has data on flood risk and heat exposure, demographic data, and then economic data. And I'll explain to you why all of these things are important in a second, but has information around energy burden, quite high in Phoenix, and other data points here around health, things like asthma rates and COPD and other things like that. But it also can show, if I click on a specific area, it can also show what, in this case, of that area of the city, if you were to implement smart surfaces, it has some data around the cooling potential, for that part of the city. So that's our analysis on cooling potential from smart surfaces. It also has the air temperature heat modeling. I'm picking on the city itself, but we have this for metro area, both cooling and heating. And the same thing here, you can look at what the data is saying around the air temperature for the modeled day that this is representing. We actually have data for an entire month, but we're just visualizing an example day in this case, just to keep it more simple. It also has land surface temperature data for the region, uh, and then there's data here on both pluvial and riverine flooding risk. The riverine data is from FEMA. The pluvial data is from a model that Trust for Public Lands put together. But the most interesting thing, I think, part of this tool is this query function, where you have the ability to, once you select, let's say in this case, we'll say Phoenix, the city itself. I'm going to add that condition. You have the ability to search on all of those things that I just mentioned in terms of percentages related to health, percentages related to various economic things, percent covered by redlined areas, energy burden, surface characteristics in terms of reflectivity or the percent of a different surface type or imperviousness, heat exposure in terms of air temperature, flood risk, and then demographic data. So just as a quick example, because we don't have a lot of time, I'll just select, because I've done this before, we want to look at parts of the city that have a high asthma rate, let's say greater than 10%. And we want to look at parts of the city that have low tree canopy. Let's say less than or equal to, I don't know, 5%. And if I add those conditions and then I run this query, it's going to pick out, oh, I made it too expansive. So I would want to adjust down from there, but you get the idea that it selects the census tracts that, are meeting these characteristics. I guess because it's in the desert there, the numbers, let's say, I'm going to make the asthma rate so we can get this number down a little bit more. Say greater than 15%. Oh, I've shrunk it too much. You get the idea. You can play around with this data and search on any of those categories. You can, add as many conditions as you want, and it will provide sort of data. There you go. That's a little more reasonable number of census tracts. So these are the census tracts that meet this characteristics of asthma rates greater than 12% and tree canopy cover less than or equal 5%. So yeah, you can slice and dice this data in really interesting ways, and it's available for the whole metro area, the census tract level, and then also for publicly owned parcels. You can search on that as well. Before I jump to the next tool, I'm going to ask if you have any questions, but I'm going to point out one other thing, feature on this tool. And here on the sort of bottom right, there's a button that says Copy IDs. So when I searched all of those for those parameters, it came up with this amount of census tracts, and these are the geo IDs for those census tracts. So I'm just going to copy and paste those because I'm going to show you something in the benefit cost analysis tool in a second. But before I shift over to the benefit cost analysis tool, any questions about this tool?
So, yeah, hi, this is David Sklar. I came on a little late, but so for things where you may not have, like you have the asthma data, but what
Yeah.
if we had the EMS data for heat transports or the death data for people who
Yeah.
died of heat stroke?
Hmm.
Would you be able to add that in, or how would we add new things that could be mapped but maybe haven't been mapped yet?
Yeah, we're actually ending our work in this phase of the project. We have been doing some fundraising to continue our engagement with the current 10 cities and metro areas for the next like 2 years. So hopefully that funding comes through, and we could make some of the tweaks that like you're talking about. Right now, we're kind of close to the end. We're delivering all the final tools next month, so there's probably not a lot of changes we can make at this point. However, all of these data sets are available to anybody in the Phoenix metro area. You could, take any of these data sets and drop them into your own GIS platforms, if that's helpful as well. But I
Mhm.
guess the short answer to your question is hopefully we get the funding so we can continue for the next 2 years, and then we can make some more tweaks to the tools.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Well, I'm going to jump over to benefit cost tool. Mary, let me know if you see any questions in the chat. Oh, why is this not? There we go. Are you seeing the benefit cost tool now, Mary?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so there's obviously all of the metro areas where we're working, like Phoenix again. Um, so uh, this is, this tool, benefit cost analysis tool, it can look at the census tract in the region. It can look at city council districts. It can look at the core city of Phoenix. It can look at suburban cities, and it can look at the whole metro area. And you can see when I change the geographic uh, level, it changed the land use land cover totals here on the right side of the screen. So just to keep it simple, I'll just pick on Phoenix itself. You can see that those land use land cover types were changed when I scaled down. It also has some data here up on the top left in terms of percent of pervious surface and existing tree cover. There's conversation we've been having with Phoenix about this number because we're using uh, trees canopy over 3 meters for shading purposes and for other reasons. And so our numbers in our benefit cost tool are always lower than the like number that most of the cities use in our network. So it's something we were aware of and thinking about. And then the total amount of stormwater runoff. Before I go over in the overall analysis, I just want to point out one thing. If you search on the census tract level, as you remember from the benefit or from the decision support tool, I copied those GeoIDs from those census tracts that I had done the query on. You can click on this button that says import census tract GeoIDs, and you can Control V on the PC here and import just the data from those census tracts, and then that will automatically populate the land use land cover data, and you can just do analysis for those census tracts. But just for this purpose, I'm just going to go back to the whole city. So once you've selected a geographic level, say you pick a Mesa or Phoenix, whatever it might be, you can then start to scroll down and start to do some analysis. So let's say the city of Phoenix passes a cool roof ordinance, and over a 35-year period, all of those roofs and all the roofs in the city will be replaced because on average 7% of roofs in the city are replaced every year. So let's just say maybe we say 90% of all the roofs in Phoenix become cool roofs in the future. And the city's going to, put together a solar program, and it's expecting, to cover 10% of the roofs. The city already has a cool pavement program. I'm just going to kind of go quickly through this because we don't have a ton of time, but you get the idea here. You can make selections. Here, it also tells you what, how much space that means. Over here on the right, the percentages, I'm just picking the percentages to make it more quick here. You can also target these surfaces separately. Like cool roofs, you can look at, steep slope, non-residential, residential steep slope, low slope, non-residential, or you can target them together. I'm just going to do that to make it faster. And then we have, bioswales, we have rain gardens, we have urban tree canopy. So you can see here on the left that all this data was kind of auto-populating based on my selections in terms of the summary data. But you can also make changes here to the intervention window. Say you think it's going to take, more like 20 years to implement these projects, but you want to analyze it out to, say you've got a climate action plan that's targeted for 2050. So you want to analyze it out to 24 years so that you can figure out what the data looks like for your 2050 climate action plan. It then calculates, it's all in live uh, form, calculating the economics in terms of all these different benefits that we have in the tool. There's the cost data and O&M data and replacement data, and then the benefits data here. You can turn some of these on, say you don't want to include the benefit of global cooling from cooled surfaces. You can turn that off and it will recalculate the economics over here on the top right. You can click on or off any of these benefits. You can also say, I've looked at all the different interventions, but then you're like, you know what, I just want to look at what I decided about cool roofs. You can click on just the cool roofs and it'll bring up just the cool roofs, or you can select, multiple intervention types. For the selections I made, it'll calculate potential for temperature reduction. This is sort of like citywide. The number would be higher in some neighborhoods and lower in other neighborhoods, but gives you a relative impact there. It has data on the avoided CO2 and CO2 equivalent emissions from global cooling, or negative radiative forcing, as it's called, from solar, from electricity demand reduction, and from tree sequestration, carbon sequestration. And then the potential for stormwater management in terms of gallons per year. And like I said, we could do that for the city. You could do it for census tracts. You could do it for one census tract, a lot of census tracts. We can do it for suburban cities or census tracts in suburban cities. We can do it for the whole metro area. But yeah, that's the benefit cost analysis tool. Any questions or thoughts about that one?
Bill, could you maybe for this group highlight some of the like the heat specific um items?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would turn off things like solar for that. You'd want to leave the cool roofs and cool pavements on. Perennial pavers actually tend to be high reflectance when you compare them to asphalt roads, for example. One of the perennial paver manufacturers, they have data. I think it's like a solar reflectance of like 0.37, so it's quite high, higher than even like a cool pavement coating. And so these things would all have an impact on heat. But yeah, you'd like take out the solar part. Uh, if you're just thinking about that
And
piece of it.
I see too there's some there's like benefits um that are also
Oh,
like
sorry. In terms of the
temperature
benefits,
benefits. Hmm.
uh-huh. You want to look at this part, the temperature reduction potential, or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, so the some of these are smaller. This is sort of citywide averages. Like I said, in some neighborhoods it would be higher, some would be lower. But yeah, with the selection that I did, this is kind of the data that comes out of that. I think in we may end up showing, like, not here in the benefit cost tool, but in the decision support tool, we may end up showing the total range, including like the highest reductions in some neighborhoods, just so people get a sense of the range. And we might, kind of slice and dice that data a little bit differently.
And this is air temperature reduction, right?
Yes, this is air temperature reduction. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, because this is focused more on the health side. Uh, we have the Harvard School of Public Health as one of our project partners, and they've been mining 911 data and Medicare and Medicaid data per the previous question, to determine what the potential impact is for morbidity and mortality through the deployment of resilient, smart surfaces, potential to mitigate some of those impacts. So yeah, it's air to air temperature focused.
Cool. So sort of depending on what people are interested in targeting, they can take a look at these different outputs. Um,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can turn these things on and off. You could turn, you could look at individual ones. Um, yeah, instead of going up and turning solar off like I did, I could have just clicked on these and left solar off. But you can also see, significant benefit cost ratio for projects there in Phoenix, assuming all of these inputs, you know, obviously would get lower if you took out some of these benefits. Okay, well, if there's not other questions, I'm gonna jump because we've got some other fun stuff to show. Hopefully fun. I'm sort of nerdy this way, so it's fun for me. But so this is
we do have
our.
one
Oh yeah,
question,
sorry. Great.
really quick before we transition. Does your
Yeah.
organization host workshops for cities, towns on how to use the tools in real time? It would be helpful with a variety of departments.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been spending most of our time in the last couple of years with the city of Phoenix itself, with Dave and Mary here, and others. But we'd be happy to do a demo and like a real-time analysis with any of the suburban cities. And we're kind of shifting our focus to the metro areas now. Um, and also, if there are policy interventions that you all are interested in analyzing, say you want to pass a cool roof ordinance like Atlanta or Baltimore have done, in the past year or two, um, you know, we'd be happy to support you on the policy front too. And speaking of policy, this is the Smart Surfaces Policy Tracker tool. Again, it's web-based. Um, it is a searchable database of more than 2,000 policies now around the country and every state. You can search on these different categories. Say you want to just look at the cool roof policies that are in the Southwest. You can search on just those cool roof policies there in the Southwest. You can search based on size of that you want to look at cities that are more than 150,000 people. So it's a um, really fast and easy to use searchable database. And then uh, if you click on any of these links, it has a link to the actual like thing. In this case, this is a project we worked on with Dallas. They did a climate bond resolution for a $1.25 billion bond where they're tying all of the projects in that bond to their climate action plan and to smart surface related projects. So you can link to, uh, there's a link to the actual bond here. And then the other piece of this uh, web tool that I want to focus on is our best practices section. Again, with our vision of keeping everything as fast and easy for cities because time and inertia are our biggest challenges. We have curated down the data. So if you don't want to look at 35 cool roof related policies in the southwestern US, we have a model cool roof ordinance um, that we think is kind of the best of the best. And this is what Atlanta used to pass their cool roof ordinance last summer. And we have like other documents, like we just published this cool pavement primer. So to the person who asked the question earlier about this concern about humans, in the space of cool pavements, this primer has a whole section on that question. So I'd recommend taking a look at that. Things around trees. We are getting ready to publish a primer on permeable pavers. And so that will be added to this. I'm not sure what section it's going to go in, but And then there's things like we have a model mayor's order or city council resolution for comprehensive smart surfaces adoption. There's some great resources in here, both on the kind of primer and memo side, policy guidance side, and in terms of model ordinances for various interventions. That's pretty straightforward. Any questions on that tool?
The the policy, like the database is from the entire US, right? Not just the places you work with.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's all 50 states, more than 2,000 policies, both at the city level, at the county level, and at the state level. Um,
We did
oh, I see
get,
a question here.
yeah.
Advocacy opportunities with the coalition. Absolutely. Our fundamental purpose is around data-driven policymaking. So we're happy to engage with any kind of policy initiatives that are relevant to smart services in our work. We do that both at the city level and at the state level and federally. We focus mostly on cities, but we do some state and federal engagement as well. One of the federal bills that came out of a presentation that we did to this extreme heat policy summit a couple of years ago that Dave Ondula was at, was a Cool Roof Rebate Act, which was introduced in 2025, but it's now just been added to a new comprehensive um, bill that was is being considered. It's called the Cheap Energy Act 2006, which I don't think is a good title. I think they should have called it the Affordable Energy Act, but nobody asked me that question. But anyway, the Cool Roof Rebate Act provisions are inside of that more comprehensive omnibus bill now. It's unlikely to go anywhere in this Congress, but depending on what happens in the midterms, it pass in the next Congress. Um, the policy tracker tool is being continuously updated. We actually started with like 500 policies, and we're now at more than 2,100. And intend to keep updating it as we can, or, and consistently, continuously. The database is really just the policy tracker, and then that benefit cost tool is a separate web tool. We are, and for the last question, we are fundraising now to expand all of these tools, in particular the decision support tool and the benefit cost analysis tool, to an additional 20 cities and metro areas around the country. We do have a letter of interest from Tucson, and I saw some people from Tucson on this webinar. So we have a letter of interest, and you're on our list. Uh, and so hopefully we can raise the funds to add those 20 additional metro areas. The ones that we have letters of interest from, if you combine the current 10 metro areas with the additional 20 and we have letters of interest from, it would be getting closer to half of the U.S. urban population. So really get into scale with the people. In terms of the question about the new administration, for us, we don't have to talk about climate change to do our work. We can focus on terms like resilience and health. We can focus on the health story. We can focus on the economic story. And so we see ourselves as, kind of nonpartisan organization that can have conversations across the political aisle. There's obviously a climate mitigation story to be had in the work that we're doing, but we don't have to talk about that part of the work. And this administration, like they released the NOFO for the build program recently, and they have words in there like resilience and health and things that we could focus on. And so, yeah, I think it's a nice way of being able to talk across political lines. A couple of our mayors are Republicans in our current cohort, and one of them, Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, has been one of our best spokespeople for smart surface policy intervention. So we intentionally were making that happen, to make sure that it wasn't seen as like a democratic or the liberal thing. It's about resilience, it's about health. about saving people's lives. It's about reducing costs, reducing energy burden. Um, yes, that is a great question. It's another thing we want to spend more time on in the next phase of our work, including if we get the funding to continue to do some work in the current 10 metro areas, to start to build in some more climate forecasting data into the tools. It's always difficult to decide like what, do you decide it's, 2100 is a 4C, is it a 3C, is it a 2C difference? It's always difficult to make those decisions, but we do think it's important to, at least on some level, even if they're not baked into the tools, we have like a separate project where we show, what the impact would be under those different changing scenarios, something like that. So that we also don't, same thing with that question of not always wanting to talk about climate in certain environments, may not build it directly in the tool, although we haven't decided, but, just to show that information in another way, I think would be really cool. I'm going to quickly show just a couple of other tools because these resources could be used for anybody outside of the Phoenix metro area. So I want to show some of these things as well real quickly before we end. So I mentioned the project implementation platform. So these are all project level tools that we have available. One of those is a spec sheet. So it has data around the cost and benefits. This is specific data to the Phoenix metro area, but it's probably pretty similar for Tucson, that whole region. Probably has some similar pricing for things like roofing materials. Um, and then there's some emerging technology data, but so the different interventions, there's specs on the different interventions. So you've got cool roofs, you have cool pavements, you have permeable paving, and then various forms of green infrastructure. So that's a resource that will be available. It's in draft form now, but all these will be finalized in February. And then we have a longer slide deck that has data from the spec sheet, though it expands on some of that data. But it also has case studies from around the country that have, data around the cost of different projects and the benefits of those projects. In this case, it's a rain garden project in Washington, D.C. And so this slide deck we built so that cities could take any, these parts of these slides and drop them into their own slide decks, and just to make it more approachable and fast and easy. It's quite long, but it's broken out by smart surface intervention type. So if you're only concerned about cool roofs, you can just go to that cool roof section and just a few slides. Yeah, I get the idea there, and that will be available for everyone. Then we have this project checklist. So this has different smart surface interventions, as well as performance thresholds that we would recommend for like city government projects, that are, cost-effective thresholds, high performance and cost-effective. And then it ties them to potential, the sections in, LEAD and Envision, both LEAD for communities, LEAD for BD and C. We're also adding the sites program in here as well. So there are different intervention types and potential sections with potential credits if you are having to do one of those certification programs for one of your projects. And then the heart of this project implementation platform is this project level calculator tool. We're still working on this. We are actually workshopping this with Mary and Dave a bit before, but the basic idea is you'll be able to enter in the data on cost. We're going to pre-fill out some of this with data that we have around these different interventions in the different cities. In this case, it's, you'd have to use if you weren't in the Phoenix metro area, you'd have to use uh, that area. Like if you're in Tucson, you'd have to use Phoenix as a proxy, but you can just enter your own data if you know the cost of solar PV, or if you know the cost of, permeable pavers, you could enter in the input data there. Um, and then you would, select, we'll just select Phoenix here. So that'll populate data in the background around, like the e-grid data around electricity, other data points like that. You would enter in that analysis timeline if you wanted to include a social cost of carbon and then also a discount rate. And then you put in information here about the existing site characteristics in these different land categories. And then you'd add information around, say you're going to do 100,000 square feet of cool pavements on a road. You'd put that information here, and then all that would be kind of automatically calculated um, here, and it would show up, similar to the benefit cost analysis tool with these various benefits. But then it also will have data around, like if it has some kind of green infrastructure or permeable infrastructure, it'll have data on the total potential gallons mitigated. It'll have data on the CO2 mitigation and CO2 equivalent potential. We don't have that in here now, but it's going to be in there in the final version. So you get the idea. It's a basic calculator, but designed to be very fast and easy to use, kind of like part along our theme of making everything fast and easy to use. Um, so those are the main tools, and then like I mentioned, this calculator tool will be tied to a nicely designed one pager that will automatically, through a macro, populate the output of the calculations into a document that you could just take to public or city council members to show the benefits without having to, write up your own document. Although you'll be able to edit it yourself too if you want to add sections or delete parts of it. But just so that it's there sort of as a template to start with. So that's everything. Hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming. There's a lot of tools, a lot of resources, and we're happy to, like I mentioned before, meet up with any of the suburban cities in the Phoenix area and, run through some analysis with you all and talk about policy as well. Do you see any other questions, Mary, that
Yeah,
came in?
yeah, a couple came through. I did
Yeah.
just want to say real quick, I know Dave and I are also really excited about that very last calculator you were showing. I think we often have trouble thinking on a census tract level of scale in terms of like actually doing projects, and so being able to have
Yeah.
something to like really hone in on making the boundaries a little more digestible is, yeah,
Yeah. And
really
it,
really
it wouldn't
cool.
have to be like, it wouldn't have to be a single project too. If you just were like, it was hard for you to think about census tract level. Say I want to think about like the overall pool pavement program for the whole city, and you could enter the total square footage in there, uh, and
Yeah.
just think about it that way too. You wouldn't have to use the larger policy planning benefit cost analysis tool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. Um, let's see. We did get a nice note about how valuable this is for urban and rural and tribal communities, um, which is
Yeah,
great.
we're focused on kind of like the built up areas and metro areas. So places where like if it's already, you know, part like a natural desert or something, then that's the best thing you can have. So it's really focused around the human made surfaces that are in the metro areas. I see a question here around, is Phoenix the only desert city? Yes, that Phoenix is the only desert city we have in the current cohort. Like I mentioned before, we have a letter of interest from Tucson, Las Vegas, um, Albuquerque, actually the whole county, around Albuquerque. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting some south, some of the like cities in the eastern part of California. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anybody, but yeah, we're going to hopefully be including more of those cities in the next phase. El Paso, I can't remember. Jacob, do we have a letter of interest from El Paso yet?
No, I don't believe
Okay.
so.
Okay. Yeah. One of our funders is really focused on California, Arizona, Nevada. So we kind of we're focusing, on that region for them. But we have talked about El Paso, and I think it would be an interesting one to think about as well if we get more funding than we are expecting.